up, people? Rasati out here in Singapore, and this is the Night Owl Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. And I'm so excited that you're here because I get a chance to share with you things that I've seen and heard and experienced, and it's been a tremendous amount of information that I've been consuming lately. And a lot of times I find that it's more than I can actually put down into words. I try to write down things that I want to remind myself of so that I can talk to you about it on the podcast later, but sometimes it just doesn't work that way. I can't help it. So recently I was able to connect with a couple of people, and I started talking to this one young lady who is actually a client of mine, and she wanted to ask about a different situation of her life. Usually I talk to her about her love relationship, and this time she wanted to talk about her relationship with her father. And as much as I want her to feel comfortable and to be winning in every situation of life, I can't always provide her with the answer. Sometimes I need her to discover it for herself. So the best thing I can do is just teach concepts that work in every situation and see if she can connect the dots. And sometimes, as is the case with most people, what works in one situation, you don't know if it could work in another. And it's almost like it's a different world that you're trying to blend into one, and you're not sure if what works in one world will work in another. So I was talking to her, and she was mentioning that, she really wanted to make sure that she provided for her father. She wanted nothing more than to make sure that he felt loved and taken care of, but there are certain habits of his that prevent him from seeing the fact that this is what she's trying to do. They tend to argue a lot. And what I wanted to tell her was, we've talked about this situation before, but in another world of hers, another aspect of her life, and it was in her love relationships. I talk about the love languages all the time, you guys, and I can't stress it enough because it works in every aspect of your life. Let me give you an example. My daughter does not like hearing criticism. She takes it and she runs it or replays it in her head as if I am telling her she's not good enough, when those words never come out of my mouth, but that's what she feels it means to her. So when I'm telling her that, you know what, I want you to try this way because when you do it that way, it's giving you the wrong answer. We're talking about math right now. It's the easiest way. It's the most concrete form for me to actually give you an idea. So she has a habit of jumping to the end rather than reading the directions. And I told her, hey, you can't afford to do that because you tend to get the details wrong. So if you start at the top of the page and read everything all the way down to the bottom, then when you get to the question, you know exactly where the information is. Now, I'm telling her this because I did the same thing she was doing. I used to skip to the answers first and then go back and try and read the paragraph, trying to find where the answers could be and try and sort out the question. So I know where she's coming from. I used to do the same thing. But for me to tell her don't do that makes her feel like she's getting it wrong. She's useless. She's worthless. And she's telling herself those things in her head, but it never came out of my mouth. So for her, she needs words of affirmation. And I've seen this before because if I start off by correcting her, her face falls, her attitude changes, and then she doesn't want to do this anymore because it sucks and it's stupid and I don't want to do this. So I lose her entire being almost. Her attitude is gone, her body posture is gone, the light in her eyes, the need to get this work done, it starts to drag. And so I know she needs the words of affirmation. But in order for me to tell her that she's wrong, it doesn't always come out as words of affirmation. So I need to make it into a game of some sort. I need it to be a little more quality time. So for her, it's words of affirmation and quality time. But it wasn't by her telling me that that's what she wants that I figured it out. I had to watch and I had to pay attention and I had to realize that this is where we start fighting and this is where I could adjust some things so that we don't fight as often. The same thing goes for my client and her father. She needs to pay attention to what it is that she's doing out of the goodness of her heart that she thinks would be helpful to her father, and she needs to see, as in observe, what he does in response. A lot of times when you talk about the 5 love languages, people are like, oh yeah, I've heard about that stuff. That's nonsense. It's not really real. But the point is, people tell you who they are all the time through their behavior, and a lot of times all you need to do is pay attention. For example, there's another person in my life that I had to figure out, and it was my brother. He loves me dearly. He and I are very, very close. But sometimes when I tell him things about himself, he goes blank. He decides he doesn't want to talk to me. And I've done the same thing to him before. And what ends up happening is I need to give him some space. He needs time to process. He needs time to think about it. And it's the same with me as well. I need time to process. I need time to think about it. I mirror him a lot when it comes to our relationship and the way we speak to each other. So we've learned this about each other, and we know that it's not that I hate him all of a sudden, I don't want to talk to him. I know that if I were to call him right back after he hangs up on me, he's not going to pick up the phone. He doesn't want to. And the same goes for me. So for me and him, I know when something gets very, very tough and something gets very, very emotional, he's going to need space. He doesn't need quality time as much. He doesn't need words of affirmation as much. He does need physical touch, but it's after a period of time where he can actually process what's going on. So I had to figure it out with him as well. If I were to look back and think about how my husband was and why things maybe broke down with us, I would like to imagine that he needed quality time. And as much as I would like to think that I gave him quality time, maybe I didn't give him quality time the way he wanted it. And we never had that conversation. And that's the funny thing. We never had that conversation. And the reason for our divorce was reconcilable differences, because we never really tried to reconcile either. A lot of times we get into an argument and then we just didn't want to see the side of each other. We don't want to be near each other because we're so angry. But ultimately, I think that quality time for him, if I'm being honest, quality time from him meant that he felt needed and he felt important. He felt masculine in the relationship. He was gone a lot. He worked a lot. And I understood that because I come from a family where my father worked a lot and he wasn't in the house a lot. So I took care of the kids. But that also meant that me taking care of the kids meant I also took care of the home. I paid the bills. I cooked. I cleaned. I took care of pretty much everything. And in my mind, I was thinking, okay, he doesn't have to come home and do nothing but relax and hang out with me. But it also meant that he had no place. He had no role in the relationship anymore, and he felt very emasculated. Now, if I were to go and ask him right now, I guarantee you he's going to be like, what? No, whatever. And he's going to give me another bunch of excuses. But I know from my point of view, looking back now, I probably emasculated him without even knowing it. I probably took on so much responsibility in the house because anytime I wanted to ask him for help, he wasn't really available. So I figured it myself because it's in my nature. I'm used to being resourceful. I'm used to being that girl. But he's used to having girls that depend on him. He's just being with women who need him for everything, which meant need him for money, need him to fix things around the house, need him to lift heavy things. And I've never been that girl. So if I were being very honest, if I were to ever find myself in a situation where I was, again, in a position to take care of everything myself, I need to learn that I can't and it's not right. And I need to give the other person the ability to help me as well, instead of being the martyr, basically. So in those regards, if I paid attention to those people, I would understand what it is that went wrong and what it is that they needed so I could effectively bridge the gap between our communication. But a lot of times we're not taught to observe the other person. Of course, when they trigger us, we know exactly what they did to trigger us, but we don't often think about why they behaved that way. We only focus on why it was triggering to us. Now, in the case of her father, I believe that he needs to feel important within the house. The kids don't really need him anymore. They're all grown. They're married. They have their own families, and they're working very hard. And he feels like he needs some semblance of norm where he feels like he can still make decisions and he can still choose his own food, or he can still choose the way he wants to live and what's important to him and what to keep and what to buy. So those are little things that he has taken on that make him feel important in his life. And if she were to ask him about those things, then he might in some way, shape, or form be able to communicate that. But chances are it would trigger her somehow and they'd end up in a disagreement. So in a lot of my conversations, it comes down to observing the other person and how they react to you. You may want, with all of the best of intentions, I mean, let's face it, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? We could want the best for the other person. We could think that we're trying to shield them or protect them or to educate them so that they can be more effective or better taken care of or any of those things. But if we don't tell them in a way that they understand it's coming with love, it might as well be the worst form of criticism and bullying and judgment in the world. So the best thing I can do is to tell you, when you find yourself in a disagreement with someone, and it's someone you really care about, pay attention to where they start disagreeing with you and what it is that they're saying they can't do, or what it is that they're saying that they don't agree with or don't like. Because from there, you need a little bit of compassion to look at it from their point of view. What is it that they need in order for them to feel important? What is it that they need in order for them to feel loved? And a lot of times they're telling you in the best way that they know how, by showing you, by doing what they're doing in order to show you that it's not okay and they don't like it. It doesn't feel good to them. And all we got to do from there is try and decipher it. And if you're lucky, ask a couple questions that they might be able to answer without being rude and invasive, there are ways that you can ask some of those questions as well. So if you have any other questions and comments about how to get this done or how to sort this out for your own life, please drop them in the comments below, or if you'd rather, DM me so we can actually have a proper chat. But in the meantime, I'm hoping this gave you something else to consider in your relationships. Observing how the other person treats you, observing how they react to you, can give you a lot of clues about what they need in their life too. All right, you guys, I love you. I'll catch you again soon. Bye.